I think one thing that I have, a gift that God has given me is vision.
Mm-hmm.
Like having a dream, having something that I believe in, that I want to make happen. And then I think I'm actually, if you were to look at like every 8 hours, it's like, I think I produce less than some other people that I know that I'm just like, geez, how did you do that and that and that all in one day? This is crazy. But I think when you have vision, you basically over time work toward achieving whatever that thing is that you want to. But this is my question for you is, how do you help someone have vision, I guess? Because some of these younger guys that I'm talking to, they don't really, I don't know how to say it. It's almost like maybe they don't have any, they're just not sure what they're supposed to do. And so they might be in just some sort of job that they don't really like. And it's maybe just barely paying the bills, but they don't have that framework of, I'm doing this as a part of a process to get to where I really want to get to, because they don't really have a vision, I guess, for their future. And it's something I've been thinking about, of, do you just ask people to pray that, God would give them that, but I don't know, but I think a lot of people are struggling with that. Just what are you supposed to do in your few years here on this planet?
Are these guys in church, like these guys in your local church that you're discipling? Okay. So I think people always say carrot versus the stick. I think it's an and both. Like, I think there's a and both, meaning this. I think there are times where we need to slow down and just dream, right? So we talked about Financial Peace University, me taking some people through how my local church just did a group. Like, how many times do people just get to sit down and dream and go, what would life look like if I was debt free and I had no debt? That's a form of vision. Now we're thinking carrot. Now we're thinking like, if you had no bills, I'm using Financial Peace as a placeholder, right? If I had no bills, if my house was paid for, what would I do? And people usually go to, I would travel.
Right.
Okay, cool. Let's go a little deeper than that. What would you do?
Yeah.
Well, then they start getting into, well, I want to help these people do this and right? So I think I'm asking the young men that I get influence over, like, let's just dream. Let's just imagine a world. Imagine a world where, right? And they start filling in those gaps. So then their imagination starts spinning. I think a lot of people don't have that. Like not because they don't want it, but just maybe they're wired different. Maybe they work hard. Maybe they're distracted. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they're sick. They don't have that. They don't have the imagination aspect. So that's the carrot aspect. You got to give them something to hope for. Right. Church does that. I think church kind of calls out the preaching of the word does that, meaning that it reminds you that there's something bigger and greater than you. And then hopefully you can be a conduit in helping the kingdom come to earth. Right.
Yep.
The stick is the flip side is like, now what if you just continue on the trajectory you've been on? What if you repeat the cycle of your father? What if you repeat the traumas that you went through? What if you repeat these things? And what happens then? And that's the stick. That's the part that we don't want to talk about. Like, I don't want to be like my dad and my mom and my dad split and bad things happen, right? But I think there's a helpfulness of sitting in that and being like, okay, what if I don't do anything? Who do I become? What if I just fleshed my current trajectory out? And the compounding effect of either positive deposits of good things versus negative deposits or lack of any deposit in the negative things. This is where I think stuff like, this is going to sound crazy, but shame can be good. Like conviction of, I'm just apathetic and lazy, right? Flesh that out over the next 15 years. And who are you when you're 35 if you're still doing nothing, right? So I think it's like exploring both things. And the more I do that with young men, the more they seem to be like, all right, like, let me just grasp onto something. You know, with one of my family members, it's like, bro, you got to stop spending all your money on eating out. Because if you keep spending all your money on eating out, you're going to keep being broke. And if you keep being broke into your 30s, it's going to be really bad. At some point, you're going to have a kid. You don't want your kid to be broke. You don't want to repeat the cycle, right? Yeah. So then we do that, and then we go, what's the goal? The goal is $1,000 emergency fund. And I go, okay, that's a Dave Ramsey $1,000 emergency fund. I have a system. I walked him through with the Ramsey stuff. And then the moment he hits that $1,000 emergency fund, boom, I'll match it with you. Here's another $1,000 in your Cash App. And he's like, whoa, like that's crazy, right? So now there's that positive momentum, and we have a good grasp of the negative momentum as well. So that's kind of what I've been doing with guys on a day-to-day basis is let's dream and imagine, but like let's also have the nightmare scenario and what life looks like if you suck.
Yeah.
You know?
That's good.
And all of it anchored on Jesus and knowing him and making him known is the ultimate North Star. But how do we make him known in our generations? The way it says David had a heart for God and God's purpose in his generation. So God has a purpose for all of us, but in our generation.
Yeah.
God gets to define what the purpose is, right? So that's how I've been having that. I'm not sure if that's helpful or not.
No, it is good. And I love your you highlighting at the end of what you said there that we're not talking about building your own kingdom and empire and get rich quick or something like that. Like that's it reminds me of so much content I see on the internet that is aimed at that, because there is a ambition in the heart of man to build something. And I don't think that that's all bad, but yeah, I love what you said at the end there, that we're actually talking about how to use the talents, gifts, and resources that we have, and how to be like within the parable of the sower, right? Like how to multiply whatever you've been given in terms of your creativity, in terms of whatever it is, how to use it all to the glory of God, right? Colossians 3:23, like whatever you do, in word or in deed, do it all unto the glory of God. And this is interesting too, because I actually think that we need creativity and originality more than, maybe even more than like in the previous generation, just in the sense that I feel like in the previous generation, now I'm talking a little bit explicitly here about like literally evangelism, or how do you, whatever that word means, how do you advance the kingdom in 2024? It's an interesting question, because I think that a lot of people seem to be very disillusioned with anything that's too systematic or formulaic. Evangelism explosion, ABCs, like there's these different things that were widely used in the 90s, and I'm not even saying anything negative against them. I'm just saying that I think people our age, generally speaking, are aware of how some of those things might kind of come across weird. And I think people are really afraid of coming across weird. And I think that there's a baggage around how do I talk about God in the world without that being weird? And I think, I don't know. And I think that fear has caused a huge deficit in people talking about God. The one thing you're not supposed to talk about is God, in politics. Yeah. But I'm sitting here thinking, I mean, we just looked at Jordan Peterson and Alex O'Connor talk about God in the Bible for 2.5 hours. So my point is the conversations are happening. And I personally think that the need is as great as it's ever been for Christians to not be ashamed of the gospel of Christ, and to pray like that Acts chapter 4 prayer, give us courage and boldness, and also obviously wisdom. These are all things that we can pray for, that God can give us. But I just think that there's a vacuum in culture and a huge need for Christians to lean into conversations about God and to help people connect dots, because there's obviously this meaning crisis. In many ways, we're in this post-truth culture. And yet I look around and it seems like Christians are shy, and Christians are afraid to talk about what we believe. So I don't know, but again, how do we do it? What's the right mechanism, if you will, to do that? I think that I don't know. I'd love to get your thoughts on this, but I think the arts, creativity, story, these different things.
I think it's in both. I think it's the arts, creativity, narrative, story, media, technology, all the things that we know we could be doing. But I also think there's an aspect of deal with your junk. I'm coming from a perspective of like a lot of brokenness, a lot of broken families, a lot of divorced folks, right? And so I think sometimes people just need to see that, like, bro, just like show me you love your wife, like show me you're a functioning, stable human that God has actually restored and did a supernatural work on. And you are changing the trajectory of your family tree.
That's good.
Right. And I think like the supernatural aspect in the hand of God that like left to my own devices without Jesus, like I'm a pretty terrible human. But because of Jesus, I'm able to be a husband and a father and a friend and a boss and an entrepreneur and take care of people and treat people well. Sometimes I think so much of that is more caught than taught. So we could teach all of the things. We could teach all the right FAQs, but I guess this is to bring the whole conversation full circle. This is why I'm empathetic with Jordan Peterson when he goes, well, what does that mean?
Mhm.
What does that mean? That could be very difficult for someone that's coming from I've come from a middle class life. I've been stable for a long time. I don't have any existential crisis. It's
Mhm.
very different when you're coming from generational trauma, baggage, just terrible things you've gone through, your parents have gone through, and you're trying to figure out how to turn that and go in a different direction and do it for the sake of the least of these. Meaning I'm empathetic to the people who have gone to prison because my closest friends have gone to prison and been decades in prison. So when Jesus says, when I was in prison, you visited me, like, oh, that hits. Because I know what it's like to carve out. Because in order to go visit somebody in prison, you got to have flexibility in your schedule. You got to have resources. You got to have means. You got to have, like, on my Saturday can be dedicated to going and seeing my buddy who's in jail, right? That requires a degree of flexibility to clothe someone, to feed someone, to take care of people. So you got to first be stable to do that for other people. And I think there's a lot of people that aren't stable. There's a lot of people that are hurting because of a meaning. And so that's why I kind of always lean into the practical side, because that's what did it for me. Like I walked with Jesus, went to church for like a decade and was still a mess and addicted to porn and struggling and emotionally stunted. And then the more I started applying the wisdom of God, the Proverbs, the Matthew 25, parable of the talents, the Luke 16, the more like the needle started moving, and I started actually moving towards those things that I believe God had showed me that I was going to do, like I'm doing now. And it was theology and practice, right? Theology, praxology for the sake of doxology, right? Belief in action for the sake of God's glory.
Yeah.
That's my heart. Father's Day sale happening right now. I need all you guys, if you haven't, man, get something for your dad, get something for your stepdad, get something for that father figure in your life.
Earlier I was saying that if you're emotionally stunted, this is a great way to say I love you without having to say it.
Yeah, that's actually a good pitch. It's a good pitch. Yeah. You can't use words.
Yeah.
You can't use words. Just get your dad a priest, provider, protector shirt.
Once a year you can communicate that you love them by physical products.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Yeah. So priest, provider, protector stuff available now. Prayer journal on sale for $19.99. All that great stuff. If you don't have the Blessed God prayer journal, if you don't have some of the merch, go scoop it up. Biggest sale of the year. All right. Later. Love you guys. Peace.